Hi everyone, welcome to the Across the Park podcast. Myself, Judgy, delighted to be joined by fellow disgruntled Evertonian, as we said off air, Mel Harvey. Mel, thanks for coming back. Good friend of the show.
Thanks very much for asking me. I was looking back to the time that I was on last with Ian, and he and I were both noting a sound of cautious optimism at that point. And I think I said something along the lines of, I don't see us scrapping for survival this season. I think we probably are going to enjoy mid-table mediocrity. That was back in September. Oh, for that to be true now.
You'd snap your hands off. I'd snap your hands off for that at the moment. I mean, I've put along the little ticket at the bottom, Mel Harvey and Judgy, where do Everton go from here? I'm not going to quite jump to that yet. I titled it on our little intro, which you'll have seen when you come into the studio, as Mel Harvey catch up. So we'll start with a little bit of a catch up, so to speak, and then we'll go back to September. I mean, just to ask you quite an open question, where did it go wrong, do you think, for Frank? And it's a big question, that, but just from your perspective, where do you think it went wrong?
I think the signings were, there was pluses and minuses, and unfortunately the minuses have outweighed the pluses. I remember in September, the conversation we had, and I think it was the end of September, and we were talking about, obviously, we sold our best player. We went out, we signed a couple of defenders who seemed to be, at that point, doing a really decent job. And Ian and I both spoke at that point that we were very, very concerned about the forward options. And my feeling at that point was, well, if we can keep defending as well as we've been defending, and we can scrap some goals and wait for Calvert-Lewin to kick on again, we might be all right. And clearly that hasn't happened. And, you know, particularly in the last few games, that quite tight defence that had been bolstered. I mean, anything had to be better than the centre defence we had last season, because it was dreadful. There's no reason why it should be. Those players aren't as bad as that. But for some reason, it just wasn't working. So he went out, he brought in two half-decent defenders, no world beaters. I mean, you know, I know Cody went to the World Cup, he didn't play. But we looked like we were defending well. We were well organised. You know, we've got a great goalkeeper. You can't, you know.
It was leaders as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think we were on that. We brought in a couple of leaders, people who spoke and were, and you know, as a if you like, an old man stubborn way of defending.
Well, they were calling them the Everton dads, weren't they? The other players calling them the dads of the team, and you could see that, and that seemed to be working, but we weren't scoring goals. And I think I made a few comments at that point about Gray and Gordon, saying they needed to do more, they needed to step up, they needed to fulfil their potential. And really, apart from Gray scoring a brilliant goal a few weeks ago, he's flash in the pan. You know, you see him sometimes, you go, God, that was great, and there's a load of talent there, and other times it just doesn't seem to come to much. And I'm sure we'll get to the Anthony Gordon issue later on in this conversation. But that's not kicked on. DCL's come back. He doesn't look sharp to me at all. He looks way off the base. The signing, Mopey's not, it's not worked. He's not, to me, he's small and he's slow. And I think if you're a forward and you're small, you need to have pace. And he hasn't got it. We've seen a couple of occasions this season where there's been through balls that he's just not got onto. So for me, for Frank Lampard, what happened was they started leaking goals and getting very disorganised and losing confidence at the back at the same time as those forward options that he as who knows who wanted that signing, sanctioned that signing or whatever. You know, it's not worked. It's just not worked. And so you've got that terrible thing of we're not defending well, we're leaking goals and we're not scoring. So when you're failing at both ends of the field, and you know, we could start talking about the midfield as well. Again, when I was last on the show in September, Garnagay had come back and he was looking good, but he's been poor since Christmas. And it pains me to say it because, you know, he looked good when he first came back. I think he's great. He can tackle. He can bring the ball forward, but he's been poor. And Anana's just been flashes. You know, you'll see half a game and go, oh, all right then, yeah. But that's not worked. So there's weaknesses all over that team. How much Frank Lampard and his team are to blame for that, I don't know, because you're not really sure who really signs players at Premier League sides anymore, you know.
Just stop you on that one briefly. And I'm not saying put the signings to one side, because I think you're spot on. Certainly in the case of Morpie, we haven't even touched on Dwight McNeil, who's been another player who's I think flattered to deceive would be kind. But just to go back a step, where you said I'm not too sure what Frank Lampard could have done. My position on that, and I certainly don't disagree with what you're saying about the signings. I certainly don't disagree that he struggled once we stopped hitting the back of the net. Do you think, and I'm asking you a direct question, do you think a more experienced manager would have took a point against Wolves, would have took a point against Southampton, and thought, you know what, it's sometimes when you're going through a patch like this, when you're not scoring goals, you're not. And is it sometimes a case where you just have to dig in and take what you can? Do you think that's where he was a little bit naive and he still is a very inexperienced coach and manager?
I think there's probably an element of that, but I also think the players need to take some responsibility as well. They're not all young and naive.
Yeah.
So I think there's a bit of both going there. I think there's a real lack of confidence in that team at the moment. And I know that seems like a bit of a cop-out, but I genuinely think there's a lack of confidence. But where I think he did fail was, we got that point at City playing a system. And then immediately the following match changed the system because it was home, and it was like, oh, we can't play 5 at the back at home. Well, yeah, you can, because if you're pushing your full-backs as far forward as that, you can, because it's not really 5 at the back, it's a 3 really, isn't it? Where Cody is best. He's best in a 3. And he got that wrong for me.
He got exposed against Brighton, didn't he, massively?
I think he didn't want to play. I think he didn't want to play 5 at the back at home. He could justify it against City because it's City. And it worked brilliantly. And one of that 5 was man-marking Haaland, and he did a great job of it. So I wonder if he...
And then he got dropped as well. So there's Godfrey, who man-marked Haaland and was outstanding. And he got dropped. Apparently he had a bit of a knock as well. But I think
he was put in to do a job. But I would have kept... I think if you're going to ask pinpoint one mistake I think he's made this season, or in this bit of the season that's obviously led to his demise, it was that he should have stuck with that back 5 for that game. He shouldn't have been frightened to playing 5 at the back at home. He should have just done that and told the full-backs to bomb forward. And so if you're talking about naivety and possibly making a mistake, that's one that I would certainly point to. So yeah, that's where I think another manager might have just gone, do you know what, I'm sticking with that team because they did a good job. Let's go out, and I know it's a different team and you shouldn't always just stick with the team, and you should look at the opposition, but I think he should have stuck with that formation.
No, that's more than fair. And I've been guilty at times of saying, horses for courses, and sometimes you do need to play a certain lineup and whatever. But I think going back to your comment about confidence, when the team was so low in confidence, and such a morale boosting results at City and performance, they played with spirit, with heart. They still created chances as well. I think that's maybe one of them moments where, to coin the phrase, he may have lost the dressing room. Where like you've got players going, come on, Frank, give us a break here. We've just had a really positive performance, loads of momentum behind us, and that's maybe the wind's been taken out of our sails, particularly the likes of Cozy, who probably felt like he got hung out to dry playing in a back 4 against a very lively and young and fresh Brighton team.
That was the thing as well. You weren't playing a slow, rubbish team. You could easily have justified to yourself and to anybody else who asked the question why you were sticking with that 5. Yeah. I don't think he should have been frightened to do that. It was a shame. And then obviously we went to United. I actually thought we played quite well at United.
I really enjoyed the performance against United, and again, another game that you walked away thinking, do you know what? There's shoots there,
but for a very, very close offside. I mean, before VAR, that goal would have been given. I wasn't at the Everton end. I was sitting in the main stand there towards the other end, so I was behind that attack. So I couldn't have called on the night. Obviously, when I saw the replay, I said, okay, yeah, he was offside. But before VAR, that wouldn't have been given.
Fine margins, though, aren't they? Could
have been a very different game. And I know it was a cup game and we needed league results, and we certainly need league results now. When you're talking about confidence and upbeat, good feeling. If we'd have took them back to Goodison for a midweek replay, I think we might have been looking at a slightly different season. I think, things could have been a lot different.
You see what it's done for Southampton, a couple of victories in the Cup, and obviously they then came to Goodison boys after 2 wins in the Cup. And you're right, momentum is a big word that's used a lot in football, but I think the momentum certainly would have swung slightly in the favour of the players, the manager, having got results potentially at Man City and Man United almost in consecutive weekends.
Yeah. So, I think, he's made a few mistakes, but I do think there was a couple of key moments there where things could have been a little bit different, and we might have been having a different conversation tonight, but we are where we are. And we're not there when we're out.
No, and you also can't argue with the form book, can you? I think it don't matter who you are. Very few managers could have got through that run of 9 defeats in 10 or 11 league games, which is is dreadful form in anyone's book. But as you say, we are where we are now. I've said, where do we go from here? It's anyone's guess. I mean, just to reflect briefly on the last few days. The saga over, Danjuma being signed, he's gone through his medical, the media. It's just the club did not need that, did they? Like, whoever is at the centre of that, get that, get it tied up, save the bloody new stadium videos for another day and get a signing out there and roll them out and get them in pictures and videos with Leighton Baines and Tatey and make it about luck. Doesn't matter, the show goes on.
Would you, if you were a footballer and you were halfway through agreeing a deal with a club, and if you were that footballer's agent and suddenly the manager disappeared, would you have second thoughts about?
Oh, absolutely. But I think that from what I understand of it, there was still a very good chance had someone just picked the phone up and went, look, boom, let's get it done, let's get it sealed. We can give you assurances over the options we're looking at from a new manager. The club's still going in the same direction. For me, and it's easy to say, we haven't seen or heard everything that's gone on behind the scenes. But if you're Kevin Thelwell sitting there and you're thinking, I can't really do nothing right now in terms of influencing the manager. What I can do is get some positivity at Finch Farm, get in there behind Leighton Baines and Tatey, get the new signing in there. There was some easy wins there in those first couple of days or the first day or so after Lampard sacked, and just missed the trick again.
Yeah, but I just think as a footballer, clearly I'm not a footballer. I've never been a footballer. What can I liken it to? When I was a journalist, and if I'd have been fired or whatever, if I'd have been all ready to make a big move to a different paper, and the editor, it was the person I really wanted to work with, suddenly got fired. If I had an option not to go there, I think I might go. Not sure about that. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because we're told that it's not the coach who signs the players. It's a different. I've watched the Mashiri interview a couple of times, trying to get my head around the processes.
Apparently, processes in inverted commas.
Yeah, and I don't know. What that says to me is that he wants to play for Frank. He was coming to Everton because of Frank Lampard, and Frank Lampard's not there anymore. And he's thinking, I don't know who I'm going to end up playing for now. So I think I'll go somewhere else where I can actually sit down with the head coach or the manager or whatever you want to call them and have a conversation with him and know who I'm going to be playing for and the style of football I'm going to be playing and the systems that I'm going to be playing under. And I think to try and get the signing of a player, I know managers aren't seen as being as critical to the signing process anymore, and Mashiri was at great lengths to point that out in that conversation, which I thought was quite interesting. My reason of that is, well, actually they are quite. I mean, when Dad was the manager at Everton, God knows why, but I mean, he used to trot us out to go and meet the wives or the girlfriends or whatever to try and have some sort of this is going to be a nice place for you to live, or this is going to be a nice club to be part of. I know it's different now, and I know it's more about money, and I know those things have changed, but it just shows you that, there's the possibility that personalities and who you're going to be working with and who you're going to be working for possibly still have some sway. So it could be less to do with ineptitude and poor processes and part of the club, and could just be the player going, do you know what, I just don't fancy it. I wanted to work with him.
No, that's a very fair point, and you're right. And they are still people, do you know what I mean? And as you say, likening it to other industries, I do that a lot when we're talking about how, you know, poorly run this club is, and talking about it as a business, which is what it is, in an organisation. But we'll stay on that note, because another couple of players, current players, who seemingly have lost interest since Frank Lampard's left, to firstly Anthony Gordon, but potentially Amadou Onana as well. We'll start with Anthony Gordon. I mean, obviously a player who, it's fair to say, wanted away at the start of the summer, or, well, we believe he wanted away. There was obviously a lot of interest from there's Chelsea, Newcastle, most notably Chelsea. You know, it doesn't take a scientist or any kinds of fancy analyst to see that his performances and his output went through the floor once that window passed, and I didn't really capture any of the form from the end of last season and even the start of this season. Is that another example of a player maybe who was being influenced by the manager, maybe more positively than we thought behind the scenes?
I thought his Instagram post was quite telling yesterday or the day before. It was, you know, seemed very much in support of Frank Lampard. He's a very young player. I think a lot of people forget this. He's young. I've got relatives who are, you know, that age, and to me, you know, you think back to when you were 20, 21 yourself, and you felt like you knew everything, didn't you? But he comes across to me as quite an immature guy, and you don't know the influence of agents on somebody like that. A lot of that chat last summer, I wasn't 100% buying. I was buying some of it as being put about by agents who were trying to force his price up and trying to force Everton's hand to pay him more. I heard that he'd bought a very, very expensive house, and it was a done deal, and then suddenly it wasn't. House back in the market, which I thought was quite interesting, and that was all around the time that the window was closing. So I thought, well, that's interesting. He's not bought that house. Obviously, he is going.
Well, you don't need to, as a young footballer, as you say, that they're still children, so to speak. You know, they haven't had that. It's all weight, isn't it? Responsibility and decisions, and it's like, you don't need that noise, do you? And that distraction when you establish yourself.
If I was talking to Anthony Gordon today, I would tell him to just train hard, build his physicality, concentrate on his football, stop running around like a headless chicken on the pitch and giving away stupid free kicks. And I'm not just talking about the one the other day, which cost us a result. He does that 2 or 3 times in a match. Go back to basics. And it's interesting that if he did have a very close relationship with Frank Lampard and his coaching team, I don't know what they were doing with him, because to me, he's gone backwards in the last 6 months. And that raw talent that's there, I don't think he's a world beater. I don't. I never have. But, you know, he could be a half decent Premier League football player with the right coaching and with the right, with the right aptitude. And for whatever reason, be that he's had his head turned by an agent, he's had his head turned by transfer talk, he's unhappy, he's lost confidence because of what's happening. He's a local lad, so he's clearly always under more pressure, because the local lads always are for some reason. I would shut off all the noise if I was him and knuckle down, try and build some muscle, try and just go back to basics and do the stuff he was doing. Was there a lockdown where he went and stayed with a personal trainer and he built some muscle?
He did,
I would say get back to doing that, and just, you know, he was in yet another new car when he was getting chased down the road the other day. It's just, there's something, I don't know what it is, but just go away and have a long look at yourself. And, you know, if he's off, he's off. And he could be a half decent player, and he could be a half decent Everton player. And it's a shame, but he's got a lot of growing up to do on and off the football pitch. And I think that's the nicest I can be.
No, you know what? Yeah, that's very, very balanced of you, and coaching it as though you're giving Anthony some advice. Now, going past the advice, right, and putting yourself in just in the seat of an Evertonian, £30 million deal or no deal?
Take it.
Yeah, completely agree. Completely agree.
I remember someone stopping me on Goodison Road. I'd just been to the food bank. Start of the season, must have been the first game of the season. Actually, it was a lovely sunny day, and said to me, "Would you take 60 million for him?" And I said, "I'd take 25, 30 million for him." And that's no offence to him, because as I said, I think there's something in there.
We've seen it though, haven't we? You know, the Ross Barkleys and the Franny Jeffers, and again, no disrespect to those lads, by the way. Again, very talented boys,
very talented, especially
again, boys who were kind of, you could see as had the head turned and were distracted for whatever reason. And it takes a lot to get that back, as you say. That advice you're giving there, very sound advice. But you know, to get players like that and individuals like that back down to earth and get them to just go, okay, right, this is what I need to do. It's tough, isn't it?
The chances are it's not going to happen at Everton now. I feel like a chasm's broken up between him and the fans, and I feel like it might be a little bit too late for him to come back from that. I hope it isn't if he does stay, and if that pressure will just keep building on him if he's getting a negative reaction and he's not being good enough. I mean, he's been, some of the mistakes he's been making, he shouldn't be making. A professional footballer shouldn't be making those mistakes. So if somebody's going to turn around and give you 30 million for a player that, sadly, I don't know whether he's got the will to go back and do the things he needs to do to get back to where he was, never mind improve, then yeah, take the 30 million.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
But spend it wisely.
Well, that was my next question. Do you have faith that 30 million is going to be invested in the right areas? And I guess that brings us to where we are now. I'm not going to dwell too much on Amadou Onana because it seems as though it was a bit of a rumor. Anthony Gordon hasn't turned up, neither's Onana. That one hasn't actually been cleared up. I don't know if he's just been put in the same boat or whatever. But
there could be a million and one reasons why they bet. I mean, I don't get it, but it would appear in modern football, players get given days off when they don't deserve them. In my book, I would have had them all in on Sunday, not as a punishment, just to go, right, let's go through this forensically and see. But what will have happened on Saturday is they were in London. Half of them won't have even travelled north. They will have stayed in London to go shopping or whatever, meet their wives, have a weekend in London. They won't have come back to Merseyside or Cheshire or wherever it is they live. They will have been, various ones will have been given days off for whatever reasons. It could be that there's that Leighton Baines has gone. Well, if they're gone, they're gone. You think he could possibly be that type of personality, and if he is, good for him. If that's the way he wants to do his business, don't want them here if they don't want to be here. It could be that. The reality is we don't really know, do we?
No.
I'd be sad to see Onana go because I think if anyone has shown a kind of tiny flash of the
bit of backbone in there,
and also just he gets involved and I almost there's moments where I look and I go, could he be our Richarlison for this season, who gets that bond with the fans, who is a bit of a talisman, who runs that extra mile, who has got great talent, by the way. He is he's a great footballer. And could he have been the one that could have made a real difference for us in this very crucial part of the season, in the same way that Richarlison did last season? I think I asked that question of you guys on Twitter to say, is that a debate that we should be having? Because I don't see it anywhere else in that team. I don't see anyone else who's going to do that.
However, it's got to be said, and I think it's a fair comment. So many players have been playing within themselves that you wouldn't know. I mean, we spoke about
he seems to be trying to do. I'm not talking from a work rate point of view. I'm talking about trying to use his talent and do the things he's good at.
Responsibility, isn't he, and ownership?
Playing with a little bit more confidence. I'd say out of a lot of very underconfident players, he seems to be playing with a bit more confidence than you just mentioned Calvert-Lewin there. I don't know whether there's a lack of confidence there, lack of sharpness. He's a striker. He very much talked about when Ancelotti was there. He told him to, stay between the goalposts, turn into a bit more of a poacher, etc., etc. And he seemed to grow in confidence massively during that period.
But you also with Dominic, sorry, just to break you up a second. I think it was over 90% of his goals. So I think it was only a couple of goals that they weren't provided by Luca Dean, Gylfi Sigurdsson, or James Rodriguez.
Yeah.
There's a distinct lack of quality from dead ball situations, from wide areas in general. You know, really? Nathan Patterson, I think he's got a lot of potential, but has been in and out of the team, hasn't really been fit. Mykolenko, really solid defender, but hasn't really got enough quality in the final third. You can see why, even if he was, you know, sharp or was anywhere close to that, he's just not getting the chances that he wants, is he?
No, there's a massive lack of quality. I think I particularly thought that. I mean, even corners and free kicks, you know, like golden opportunities to put the ball in a really good position, and that just doesn't seem to happen. I mean, you know, I think Gray, he has done some really great things, but sometimes some of his free kicks and corners are poor, and I think he would be the first to admit that. So yeah, there's a lot to be desired there, and you're right. And so Calvert-Lewin's not getting that, and I just think in himself, you know, he's been in and out with injury. One injury seems to be leading to another with him, which often happens, especially when you start talking about hamstring injuries. So, you know, he's another player I desperately want to see do well, because I like him, and I think there's a lot of talent there. Do I think he's going to be one of the great Everton number 9s? No, he's not. You know, he's not there. He's not Andy Gray. You know, he's not 16. But you know,
not even Kevin Campbell.
I see. You can see the age difference between you and I there. But he's decent, and it's a shame. And you're right. He needs to be playing with better players. And I think a fully fit, fully confident Calvert-Lewin would still be struggling a bit with the service he's getting, particularly at the moment in a very underconfident team that just doesn't seem to be really trying stuff.
Yeah, you go back briefly, and I'm not going to dwell too much on this because you'll probably laugh. But I did mention this to my dad because the thought crossed my mind when I've watched obviously those great teams in the 80s that your dad was fortunate to be part of as a coach. And you look at like players like Adrian Heath, who did, you know, at moments, imagine playing into your front on his own, you know, like without a big man. And I'm not saying that is going to be by any stretch Neil Maupay. He doesn't deserve to be mentioned in the same breath as Inchy, but just think of that for a moment. And that was something that I mentioned to my dad and his mates. He went, you know what, you're spot on. I could not in a million years imagine Inchy have ever got to the levels that he did if he wasn't playing alongside, you know, a big man who could do that work for him, get those flick-ons, knock the ball down, you know, just be a body in there so he could pick up the bits. I just think that, and look, you probably see where I've gone with a few of these comments. I just think if those signings and those players were brought in, I just don't feel like he's tinkered enough to really get anywhere near the best out of some of them at times. Right?
I don't even think you can mention Maupay and Adrian.
No, and I'm not. I did.
And I'm not trying to be, you know,
think of any of the players, even in Premier League. No, even in Premier League times, you just don't.
I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I think if you're small and you're quick and you're strong, you're going to do a lot better. And for whatever reason, whether we've just not seen the best of him, I'm not seeing that in Maupay. He's not strong enough. Yeah, you're right though. Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to go back and think, did Adrian Heath ever play up front on his own? He might well have.
I don't believe he ever did. I obviously wasn't at every single game, but I did ask him. My dad and his mate said, "Did Adrian Heath ever play?" And they were like, "No." But it was obviously he tended to come in when one of the two were injured, and obviously he had that spell in '85 when he came to the fore, and that was due to an injury. So anyway, it was just one of them. And I said the last few games, and it wasn't a comment about Maupay in general. I just said, put two up front for God's sake. Yeah. He's got a forward sitting on the bench. Even if it was Ellis Sims, I was just like, just get two forwards up there.
No, he can't play
problems.
No, he can't play up there on his own. He just can't.
No.
So you talk about tactical decisions gone wrong. He can't. And it was quite obvious after a couple of games he couldn't.
He persisted with that for a while as well, didn't he? But anyway, I'm gonna move on slightly. We're obviously in a position now needing a new manager. But there's a list, you know, as there always is in the betting for those managers. I'm just going to give you a yes, no, and if it's a maybe and you're not sure, just like you can just shrug or whatever. I'll work my way down the list. Top of the list, Marcelo Bielsa.
Yes.
Yes. Sean Dyche.
He's a maybe.
A maybe. Gone. Why?
Feels like a slightly backward step. We're taking on someone who's fired by someone else.
Yeah.
People say, oh, but he'll keep us up. But will he?
Fair enough. No, yeah, I know where you're coming from there. Ralph Hasenhüttl.
Oh, yes. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I agree. I actually really like the way that his teams are played, despite the 2-9-0 defeats.
Well, yeah, there is that.
This is going to be an interesting one. Sam Allardyce.
No.
Agree. Millsy would not agree, but absolutely agree. Don't want him anywhere near the club again. Despite, by the way, and I will say it, I've said it a number of times, he done a job for the moments he was here, and that job was sufficient, is what I'll say. But I did not enjoy that period.
I'm going to just as an aside to that, I'm very fond of Sammy Lee. So that is no reflection whatsoever on Sammy, who is a top guy. Sorry, I know he's a top guy.
No, fair enough. That's fine. I don't know Sammy personally, so that's fair enough. Wayne Rooney?
No, not yet.
Agree. This is an interesting. I don't know how well you know this guy, but if obviously the journalism, you may have done a little bit of looks, a bit of research on him. Carlos Corberan.
Don't know enough about him.
Okay.
So I'd have to say a maybe there, and I would bow to other people's expertise.
Just a bit of just for your own interest and for anyone who's watching.
I've seen him mentions, but I just don't know about him.
He was basically under 23s coach at Leeds while Bielsa was there for the whole period. When Bielsa left, he went to Huddersfield. He was at Huddersfield for just over 2.5 seasons. Took them to the playoff final. They fell short, but he had a shoestring budget. Took them to the playoff final, and then ended up moving on. He since took over West Brom in his first 10 games.
How's he got on at West Brom? Yeah, that's
he took them from second bottom up to a point from the playoffs. Interestingly, and this will interest you. His particular speciality at Huddersfield and at West Brom has been set plays. Scored 18 goals. 18 goals in 10 games at West Brom have come from set play. A lot of goals from set plays. Moving down the list, a few more. David Moyes.
Now, this is an interesting one. Part of me wants to say no for 1,000,001 reasons, but the one thing that David Moyes will give you is a very, very, should give you
stability.
Give us was a very well-organised team.
Yeah.
But then again, if you look at some of the results West Ham have had, obviously not against us. So that's a maybe for me. I don't think you should look back. So that's a more verging on the side of no, maybe.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. I'm not going to go through it because some of the names do get a little bit daft. The one I'm going to just put to you, and I haven't really thought about it until I've seen these names in the list. Would you consider anyone internal? So I'm talking, the duo at the moment are in charge, very unassuming characters. Obviously, one of them, Leighton Baines, being an Everton legend, so to speak, because of his number of appearances and one of the best left backs in Premier League history. Do you think it's too dangerous to give it to allow an internal caretaker manager, so to speak, to take over to give us time? Or
I think that might end up happening. If you ask anyone in my family, they will tell you that Leighton Baines is one of my all-time favourite Everton footballers. I've actually, my nieces and nephews gave me a little model of him that sits on the shelf in the kitchen. So much of a favourite of mine he is that if I see him out running when I'm out running, I have to cross over the road onto the other side because I would go bright red.
Yeah,
and he was doing some sprint training once and kept running past me, and in the end I had to say to him, come on, do you know what I mean? It's hard enough as a 50-year-old woman going out running without you. I'd sprint past me every 5 minutes, and he laughed. Huge Leighton Baines fan, suffice to say. I would hate that not to work. Can you imagine? That would be awful. So that's why I'm going to say no to that one. I just don't think he's been in it long enough. I don't think he's, not saying he's not a future football manager, but wouldn't it be awful if somebody's status at a club got tainted because they were put into a position too soon? My fear is he'll probably end up being in charge for the next game because you know what we're like, getting stuff sorted out.
Exactly, yeah. No, I've got a strong feeling that might happen as well. Okay, well that brings us that little section to a close, and it, you know, as your answer suggests, it's very much, you know, a bit of the unknown, isn't it? We really don't know what's going to work. I don't think we really know, and that's the sad thing about it. We don't really know what we need because we don't know what's actually there to support the manager. We don't know how influential Kevin Thelwell is or isn't. We don't know how much support the academy team or whatever, or how much any of the changes that have been made have had any impact. So I think for me, and you kind of touched on it with almost the comments around Sean Dyche, is you kind of know he's got a very good chance of stabilising and getting us safe. But if he doesn't, it could be even worse, couldn't it?
Yeah, and I don't like it as a long-term option, and I'm sick and tired of chopping and changing. You know, if you look at that team now, the players there are a ragtag bunch of some of them, quite a lot of them, not great, who've been signed by different managers. And I think if we're going to move in for somebody just to get us to the end of the season and then we change again, and how often is this change going to go on? I don't think there's any doubting that Frank Lampard has a terrible run, and there was an argument for change, but where is it getting us, this constant chopping and changing? A man, it's getting us nowhere. You know, there's plenty of Arsenal fans who would have had Arteta out of Arsenal last season. Now, I'm not comparing Frank Lampard to Arteta at all, but what I'm saying is that there was huge clamour from some very high-profile Arsenal fans for him to go, and it would have been very easy for the board there to have been influenced by that and ditch him, and look what's happened there. Now, I'm not saying that would have happened with us. You know, stuff was bad. It was really, really bad, and there's no doubting that Frank Lampard had made some mistakes, but I just think if we just bring somebody in to get us to the end of the season with a mind of, well, he's going to be going at the end of the season anyway, we'll be sitting here again in 6 months having this conversation again. And
the bigger one for that, Mel, as well, is if we did bring that type of profile of manager in, the chances are we can't back him because we can't afford to have another 3 or 4 players on the books that are not going to be here beyond the season. So it would be a very strange one, because if you brought Sean Dyche in, I'm pretty sure he'd say, I want this person, that person, that person, and they're all going to be to suit a certain style of football to get us results. And the chances are, if another manager comes in for the long term, they're going to be saying, I don't want them anymore. And then you're back in that cycle again of having players on the books that are stopping us from investing in the future.
And I think there must be a manager out there. And I'm away to the bookies after this, by the way, after what you've just been saying. There must be a manager out there. There must be somebody out there who can keep us up and give us long-term stability. Now, I'm not getting paid £1 million a year to make these decisions. You're not getting paid £1 million a year to make these decisions. There are people with
available. Someone wants to pay me £1 million a year to make them decisions.
But there are people there who are getting paid an awful lot of money to make those decisions, who should be doing that homework, who aren't doing all the other things that you and I and other football fans have to do to keep a roof over our heads. And I think that's all they should be committing their time to at the moment. And I'd much rather see us bring someone in who will keep us up, clearly, but then not have to be changed again at the end of the season. Yeah. Would Allardyce come in and keep us up? Possibly. Would Sean Dyche come in and keep us up? Possibly. But is that who you want for the next 3, 4, 5 seasons? And I think that's the big question. And I would like to think that before you sack a manager and a coaching staff and pay a hell of a lot of money out in compensation, you've possibly thought some of these questions through.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't take business decisions like that without thinking of what's coming next, rather than I'm just going to deal with what's right in front of my nose at this moment. It's like, well, what's coming after that? And I would like to think, and I would hope and pray that, you know, that kind of planning is in place. Whether it is or not, who knows? I mean, I don't know why I'm laughing, but you know.
No, exactly. We definitely don't. I think for me, and I've kind of convinced myself, not only with my own nose, but also by the comments I just made to you. I think Carlos Carveron looks a good fit to me, as in he's the profile of Bielsa. He's the young version of Bielsa because he's worked under him. He's shown that he's capable of getting results on a budget. He's shown he's capable, of turning a dressing room round that is low on confidence, as he's done at West Brom. I think it's got all the signs that you've got a short-term fix there potentially, who's capable of getting a new manager bounce, but also someone who's maybe capable of putting a blueprint long-term on the club.
Do you think if there is unrest in that dressing room, and we don't know that there is, there's obviously been a few rumours of different things, and obviously, we know Decore was training alone. That seems to be like a fact, doesn't it? That seems to have happened. Do you think somebody like him is going to get the respect of players like that, or do you think he'll just come in and go, well, if you don't respect me, off you go? Because I mean, let's face it, Decore's not really done much this season.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think thankfully we haven't got any huge names, have we? I don't think we've really got anyone in that dressing room, despite what we say about their performance and their lack of quality. I don't think there's anyone there that's so influential that literally you can't afford to drop them, or the rest will follow them.
True.
One thing we have got are influential, as we've talked about, are the dads, aren't they? And I can't see the likes of Tarkowski and Cody turning the nose up at someone who is, is young and ambitious, but has also got a really fixed idea of the way they want to play, and they're willing to work with players on that.
I think for those two as well, I've always felt with those two, this was kind of like a bit of a second chance for them coming to Everton. And they were, at that, and it worked for Cody for a while. He got, he went to the World Cup. I know he didn't play, but he was in, he'll always be able to say he was in a World Cup squad. Yeah. So it seemed that moving to Everton, albeit on loan, had been a decent move for him, and was giving him another chance almost. So yeah, you'd like to think the likes of them would go, right, okay, let's knuckle down. And quite frankly, as you say, the ones who think they're better than they are, who don't want to play for somebody like that, well, they can get lost anyway, really, can't they? So
there's not many players in that squad that are indispensable, and because of the slightly better work that's been done over the last year and a half, we've shifted a lot of those high earners off the books. The high earners that are left that are not, fit to be high earners have only got 6 months left on the contract anyway. So I don't think it's a bad time for a manager who is still looking to prove themselves at Premier League level, which Carveron will fall into that category.
I'm off to Willie Hills after this conversation.
Well, let's just hope we
can, before you put this online.
let's hope we can get the cash together to pay his pay the compensation. That'll be the head.
They're not going to want to lose them, are they?
No, absolutely not. They've already spoke up, to be fair. I think the chairman come out today and said, look, if Everton are interested, they need to pay the compensation, and we'll go from there. But watch this space. But listen, Mel, I've took enough of your time up this evening. It's always great to have you on. Hopefully the next time we have you on, we're back a little bit closer to where we were in September, looking forwards with a bit more of a clearer direction of travel as well.
Definitely. And I just hope that we see over the next few weeks the fate of the fans getting repaid by the club and by the players. I think there's a huge amount of responsibility on them after what the fans did last season. And I count myself among them, by the way. There's a huge amount of responsibility on both the hierarchy of the club and the fans to do something to repay that faith and repay that effort and commitments and blood, sweat and tears that those fans give to the club. I know we should all go and get lives and find more important things to worry about, but unfortunately we don't. So here's hoping.
Here. Thanks a lot, Mel, and take care. We'll catch you soon. Cheers.